My caves have been so lonely recently. It's almost as if the hunters have forgotten I'm here.
I'm sure they have.
Excuse me?
They've totally forgotten you.
Well, that's rude of you to say.
Well, it's true. And you know why?
I don't think I care to know, actually.
Me.
Please leave me alone.
It's me, Kulve. They're hunting me.
At least I don't die at the end of the quest like a bitch.
Hello, my fellow hunters. Today, then, we talk Safi'jiiva and Kulve Taroth because, well, they're Iceborne's main siege monsters. Sorry, Zara Magdaros. And I think it's very easy to say that the pair of them, especially if you remove all nostalgia, do stand up generally as the best siege experiences ever placed within Monster Hunter. And don't get me wrong, our Lord Saviour Gogmazios will forever be in my top 5 monsters of all time, and neither of these two are, but I cannot deny the evolution of the siege experience we've had in World and some of the just unique awesomeness that they have brought to the table. But what is harder to say is which one of them is, air quotes, better, and while that answer is obviously going to differ from person to person, while that answer is never going to be definitive, it is something I want to tackle today, because now that Safi's settled in, we can actually have a look at it, because I think it's closer than I initially assumed before I sat down and really thought about it. So, firstly, let's get something big, major, easy out the way. The actual outside of the hunt itself mechanics. How you get the weapons, the rewards, how the siege process works, all of that, the lobby stuff, right? Safi'jiiva takes that without really a second thought. Kulve Taroth's RNG roulette was just, and while Safi is still, let's be honest, very RNG, it is night and day being able to see steady progress as you go along, as you slowly upgrade your weapon, as you get Dracolite in bits and pieces, as opposed to, maybe I'll get it with Kulve, no, I've not, alright, let's try another 500 times! The notion of I've either got the weapon or I've not, as opposed to I'm slowly getting to the weapon that I want, is just everything. And outside of that, the Safi armor, of course, with its very unique set bonus, brings a lot more creativity to the game, though I will admit Kulve's aesthetic, the golden armor, is probably my second favorite set in all of Iceborne, well, all of World, so I kind of have to give her a little bit credit there. But in terms of actual, reward delivery system, it just has to be Safi. And to be fair, talking of rewards, his equipment has done a lot more, is a lot more interesting, and kind of blows Kulve Taroth's out the water. Again, aesthetically, I prefer the golden look, I have to admit, but you can't compete with Awakenings just with normal weaponry. It's not really fair, which is why I'm not going to give Safi'jiiva a point for that, because it really is unfair, but let's be honest, that's the truth. So Safi, 1-0.
Take that, you silly golden lizard.
Then we move on to, well, let's actually look at where we fight them before we start talking about them themselves. And I think it's very, very easy to say that the caverns of El Dorado are much superior to Safi'jiiva's Nest, because Safi'jiiva's Nest, as fun as it is as an area, it is mostly just brown rock circles with a little bit of trimming around the outside. It's very much not the focus, which is probably because it doesn't need to be, because Safi doesn't move in that way like Kulve, so the environment very much does take a back seat because he is front and center. But even when you get down to the third area with the bloody river Styx aesthetic going on around the outside, and don't get me wrong, that whole thing is absolutely badass, as is the ghostly eerie fire, the rocks raining from above, looking around, everything you see, it just is gorgeous. but that has to compete with quite literally a golden cavern with molten gold rivers between them dripping from the ceiling, and it's quite literally dazzling. Not to mention the size of it is much larger, and the potential of it is through the roof. I still think it is a crying shame that we never got anything other than Kulve there. It's big enough to have other monsters. I would love golden variants that have got trapped down there or found their way down there, and the gold in the air is slowly built up on them, and you have actual goldenified monsters. How much fun would that be? So it is impossible for me to not give the nod to the caverns of El Dorado, which means 1-1.
Ooh, who's laughing now, you oversized discount fatalis?
So look, I want to do a lot of categories here, I really do, but I feel like we can kind of spread this too thin. Like, I could bring in who has the better theme, let's use that as a point to one or the other, but that's just not fair, is it? Kulve Taroth's is good. But can you compare it to Safi'jiiva? You just can't, but also at the end of the day, they would have to be very close for theme to push one or the other over the edge, and I just don't really think that they are. So, look, we're gonna stick to what I hope are main factors. So, now for the actual process of sieging itself. How you actually go about from starting to, well, killing, or I guess in Kulve's case, horn breaking, because, you know, we're not always monstrous murderers. We just maim things and let it escape. That's way better. Look, Kulve Taroth was very much growing pains. The pursuit system was novel, having to use the entire hub's worth of people was novel, but in practice, having a system where the most efficient and encouraged first run of the fight, and I say fight very loosely here, is to just kind of semi-AFK, follow Kulve around, picking up tracks and doing really nothing actually monster huntery, then abandoning. Then, now that you've raised the pursuit level to 4, 5, or 6, actually killing Kulve Taroth. And yes, sure, it was possible on Pursuit 1, but let's be honest, it wasn't for 99% of people, and that's kind of what matters here. So, the fact that Safi'jiiva, while you still need multiple goes, and yes, admittedly, it does take longer for a full complete of Safi on average, you are actually encouraged to just fight him as hard as possible, because the harder you fight him the first time, the easier it is to fight him the second time, and that is so much better! It just is! And while sure, the very first time you do Kulve, that mysteriousness to it, seeing her just slowly walking past as you look to, well, research her and pick up those tracks and pick up the chips, that kind of has a neat little feel to it, but it really is just that first time. It gets very old very, very quickly. So, in my book here, Safi 2, Kulve 1.
One more point for me, one less victory for Mama Jagras.
So this takes us then to the first impression of the monster, your first run, your first completion, which I think is one of the most important things for any monster. That first time, that's when hunters fall in love, that's when monsters make the top 5 lists. So, they both have incredible first impressions, they really do, but it's... Safi'jiiva, the fact you actually have to fight him the first time, seeing the adult form of Zeno after so much speculation for so long, and then of course seeing Sapphire of the Emperor, which I hold to be the single best attack ever in Monster Hunter. How can that compete with you're following her around for a little bit, maybe fighting a bit because you don't know better at this point, and then she kind of escapes after 10 minutes and you didn't really get to do much, not even really see the third area, probably. I think it's hard to say that Safi's recon was not much more exhilarating, not much more hype building, not much more climactic than Kulve's first time out. Kulve was buoyed by the caverns of El Dorado, because the environment really helped, especially with all the golden endemic life to capture and the areas to find, but when we look at the actual, okay, what am I doing here? How am I interacting with this monster? Safi really does take the cake, which means Safi 3, Kulve 1.
Hell yeah! I mean, how hot does her fire even burn anyways? Silly little orange fire.
Moving on then to, well, the two biggest categories, let's be honest. The two meatiest ones. And, well, this might be a little bit contentious, because this one is the actual fight itself. Not the following around collecting tracks, not the recon, the actual fight. So from Kulve Taroth's second area, Safi all the way, including the third one, the full-on hunting of monster hunting, you know, the reason we play this game. Look, I honestly kind of want to give this to Kulve Taroth.
Oh, he's a madman! A madman!
And the reason for that is, to me, Safi is a little anticlimactic. Because it's based on Zeno, because it has Zeno's moves enhanced, we're kind of already familiar with it. So there is that, well, less of an element of, oh, look at that, oh my god, going on there than there was with Kulve when we started seeing melting gold puddle beams and generally giant golden Jagras horn charges, which still are absolutely fantastically amusing to this day. But for me, it really comes down to the recon mission kind of shooting Safi in the foot. Because while the recon was just eclectic, leading to, as I said earlier, the Sapphire of the Emperor, the single best attack in all of Monster Hunter for me, when it came to the actual siege, adding that third layer added, well, not much. I don't think I'm alone in being a little bit disappointed that he essentially didn't really do anything different after he descended. He didn't change to like the darker form we saw in the teaser. He didn't get a sort of new climactic move. He didn't really change it up that much. The environment carried most of the work there when you got to that last phase. And yes, supercritical mode's fantastic, but even then I thought the wings would glow with the constellation a little bit more, be a bit more widespread, and there's just something about it that kind of didn't have the oomph that I wanted from something that had so much promise from the recon. And to me, when you compare Kulve Taroth, and I'm going to go specifically Arch-Tempered here, which might be unfair because we'll maybe get a Safi Arch-Tempered, good lord, you kind of see that fighting Kulve in a golden room with the ceiling literally dripping with it as she melts the floor underneath you and looking just sparkly in that platinum cloak, it really is just wonderful. The entire air shimmering orange with the heat of this golden furnace you've been put in as you desperately try and cleave away the horns, and there's just something about that that really speaks to me, and I really feel that it's kind of more maybe epic than Safi's final area, which kind of isn't. To me, Safi as a whole is like a good 7-8 out of 10, the actual fight, and it would be higher if it wasn't Zeno already kind of almost spoiling most of his attack patterns. So Kulve Taroth then starts at like a 3 or a 4, but is a full-on 9, 9.5 when we get to that final area, and I kind of got to give it to that high point because it stands out more in my memory, especially with Sapphire of the Emperor to me getting dulled over time because he spams it so much, and also it really should melt your health like Lunastra Nova when you're not behind cover. You can see blue fire just surging onto your hunter, and it just doesn't do anything for you, and that kind of takes away from it as well. And I'll be honest with you, I've died to Kulve Taroth's final area more than I have Safi'jiiva in general. I don't know what that says, whether it says more about me or anything, but I think the high points of Kulve's fight are higher than the high points of Safi's fight, largely because the recon, combined with him being based on Safi'jiiva, lowered the impact of everything that he does, especially when the third area didn't really add anything new to impact us with. And that, again, I realize might be my most contentious point here, but can I though? Can I just ignore how dull early Kulve is? Maybe I can't. You know what? They're both siege fights and they have their flaws because of that. I'm gonna... this might be a cop-out, but I'm gonna make it a draw. I am going to make it a draw. Safi'jiiva 4, Kulve Taroth 2.
And I bet he doesn't even like gold!
The actual monster itself, its aesthetic, how it operates, the bit of lore and biology behind it, the red dragon versus the glorious dragon, the adult Zeno, who looks really the most dragony dragon we've ever seen, or the golden hoarder, the red emperor or the golden empress.
Fight!
That is a really difficult call, isn't it? And it's something of a conundrum for me, because I think if Zeno didn't exist and we just immediately got Safi'jiiva, it would be a slam dunk for him. But because we know him to be adult Safi'jiiva, that kind of takes away a little bit for me from his mystery, from his impact. And look, seeing those bluey, super bright energy beams come out of that red, just rigid scale, it just doesn't work for me. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't work for me. And the fact that we thought he was going to be black from the teaser, which would contrast with it beautifully, and it would work, especially with the star constellation on his wings, which again, I really thought there should be more of and on for longer, it just loses a little bit of, and mainly that's from my own hype not being met, whereas with Kulve Taroth, I expected nothing, and got this ridiculously inventive dragon that looks like a giant great Jagras goat queen, that adorns herself in gold from the environment as a literal mantle to protect herself, shining, and it's just beautiful. What a dragon that spent its time burrowing around collecting precious metal and hoarding it. I mean, that's very dragony by itself, is it not? Whereas adult Safi'jiiva kind of just sort of came at us out of nowhere and doesn't really look like adult Safi'jiiva to me. I still have a hard time seeing that transformation. How does wavy, kinda alien-y glow dragon turn so, well, normal red dragon looking? I mean, I can buy it or at least accept it because, you know, Monster Hunter, but at the same time, I just think he is perhaps a little bit less creative, mainly because of what already has come before, than Kulve Taroth, which was so out the box to me. And I want to give this to Kulve Taroth. I really do. I think that Kulve Taroth is the superior monster. I think in both aesthetic and how they operate, and don't get me wrong, absorbing energy and changing the environment is very cool, but Kulve Taroth's more grounded, albeit in a more glittery sense. But I love that also its ecology differs depending on where it is. It might gather silver or platinum, or maybe hopefully there's a diamond one somewhere, and that is wonderful too. Whereas Safi'jiiva kind of just lives or dies on, do you like that it's adult Zeno? If yes, yeah, if no, no. And that's a little bit of a shame to me. So in terms of the actual aesthetic of the monster and what it represents on an ecological level, how unique it is as a creature, I honestly gotta give it to Kulve Taroth. I just think she's a more interesting being, albeit a less cool, badass, powerful one, but more interesting to me, and that's really what it comes down to. So, final score then, Safi 4, Kulve Taroth 3.
Get a better color scheme, asshole! I'm sorry, I'm really competitive.
So there you have it. You might not agree, in fact, probably you don't, so I'd love to hear your own points. I realize, again, that was very just quick smash and grab, but there was a lot to cover, there really was. But by process of elimination, I guess Safi'jiiva would come out on top for me, which is interesting, because I think they're both just as good in their own way if we ignore how they were kind of mechanically implemented in the Siege reward loop sense. So yeah, Safi'jiiva, winner!
Just as I thought. Now, where can a fella get a nap around here?
Let me know your retort, but for now, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon. A goodbye.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit.